Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2022 Wells Fargo Data Dive Show. We have quite a bit to get into. I also posted some research to my social media earlier today, listing a couple of interesting facts of the two winners at the 2017 and 2018 Quicken Loans. So make sure you go check that out and see if you can guess the player that qualifies under those circumstances. But like I mentioned, we have a lot to get into. All statistics provided tonight and every night are provided by fantasynational.com. It is an amazing resource. It is well worth your investment. It's going to make you a much better gambler, much better DFS player. Go check them out. You won't regret it. I mentioned my social media. The links to those are in the descriptions of all three streaming services. Make sure you go give me a follow there if you want to see some of the research that I do and give you some tidbits on some players that I'm keying in on. That's also where I post my betting cards for the tournament of the week. And then finally, we are live. Chat is open. I want to hear from you all. What are you looking forward to this week with a slightly different Wells Fargo? Are you keying in on anybody in particular? How do you think TBC Potomac is going to play? Any early leans, pivots, fades for DFS? We're here for all that and any of the questions that you all have. So let's get right into it. We are going to dig into the data for the 2022 Wells Fargo. The GCSAA tournament fact sheet is up. So let's go ahead and cover that very quickly before we really dig into the data and try to figure out what metrics are going to be focused on this week and whatnot. So let me bring up chat. And again, we are live. Hoping you join me in chat. Want to hear from you all. How was your Mexico Open this past weekend? Any thoughts coming up for the tournament this week? Have you looked at the betting lines? Do you have any values in the sportsbook and outright wager market? So make sure you jump in chat. So we are at TPC Potomac in Potomac, Maryland, which is right outside Washington, D.C. The TPC Potomac is a par 70, measures just under 7,200 yards at 7,160. The stimp is pretty fast at 12.5. The original architect, Tom Clark and Ed Sneed, renovated by Steve Winslow and Jim Hardy. The average green size is just over 4,200 square feet, which answers a few questions from the graphs that we looked at last night in the initial research show. That explains the greens in regulation being lower than the tour average. It explains the proximity being closer to the hole than the tour average. So a lot of things to factor in there. It's also why there are less three putts at TPC Potomac. So that answers a lot of questions there. There are quite a few bunkers around the course, a lot of rough as well. 10 holes with water in play. We mentioned last night that we are on bent. They are typically fast. With the fairways, bent grass as well, but the rough is fescue and bluegrass. So again, just a quick recap, it is a fairly short par 70 at 7,160 yards, fast bent greens. There we go, fast bent greens, small greens, lots of rough, lots of bunkers, lots of water in play. So with that, we will move over to Fantasy National and the homepage. Went ahead and kind of filtered for the calendar year, so starting January 1st, 2022. And I have not reduced the number of rounds. The most rounds, I believe, is 43, from Brian Stewart. So I haven't reduced the number of rounds. I just kind of want to get as much information as I can and start narrowing in that way. So a quick review here. Since the beginning of the calendar year, your top 10 performers just overall on the PGA Tour are Russell Henley, Matt Fitzpatrick, Cameron Young, Rory, Keith Mitchell, Keegan Bradley, Sepp Straka, Brian Harman, Corey Connors, and Matt Kuchar. Some of these rankings will be a tad bit different now that the Mexico Open has been added late in this evening. So let's see. Other things that we might have reviewed from last night. I know Fast Bent Greens was a part of it, so let's go ahead and filter on bent greens and fast. Definitely going to have to expand our view, as the only fast bent greens and bent greens in general that we have had this so far this calendar year is at the Masters. So let's move that back to May the 1st. And we have, what's this, 28 rounds from Cam Davis? Yeah, that'll be plenty. So your top performers on fast bent greens in the past calendar year from May 1st forward are Rory, Vaughn Taylor, Abraham Ancer, Sam Ryder, Troy Merritt, Seamus Power, Mac Hughes, Pat Perez, Zach Johnson, and Cam Davis. I mentioned last night that some of your tournament winners are up here, which makes no surprise. Rory winning the CJ Cup on fast bent greens, Seamus Power at the Barbasol on bent greens. Those were average speed, but still bent greens. Cam Davis, your winner at the 3M, also on fast bent greens. It is important to note that there have been a few field changes, and I was reminded by seeing Eric Van Rooyen. So Eric Van Rooyen has withdrawn, as well as Mito Pereira, and I believe there was another one, and the name's escaping me. Hopefully I can remember it if that person comes up. But I know those two have withdrawn, Eric Van Rooyen and Mito Pereira. So there is a quick look at your fast bent green putters. Another thing that we kind of looked at last night was strokes gained total on short courses. And I don't know if we're going to have enough to go just from the calendar year, although we're going to check. Let's see. We got 20 rounds. Yeah, probably not enough, depending on which rounds or which tournaments these are. We got the Sony, the Amex, Pebble Beach, Honda, and RBC Heritage. So Honda and RBC Heritage are actually a couple of pretty decent comp courses. Honda being a short and difficult course with a lot of water in play. Same with RBC Heritage. It is definitely short. Now, the difficulty is certainly not as high as the Honda and not as high as TPC Potomac was in 2017. Now, 2018 played to decent, or I would say average level difficulty. So I'm not sure if RBC Heritage fits in difficulty mold, but definitely does in course setup. So having seen what tournaments there are, I'm actually pretty okay with this filter here being January 1st. So since the beginning of the calendar year, your top performers on short courses are Seamus Power, Sepp Straka, Keith Mitchell, Russell Henley, Troy Merritt, Lonto Griffin, Joel Damon, Denny McCarthy, Adam Svensson, and Francesco Molinari. Molinari only 4 rounds, so one tournament, the Amex, played it really darn well. But he is the last winner at TPC Potomac, at least for a PGA Tour event. He ran away from the field in 2018's Quicken Loans National, shot a minus 21. The next closest competitor was minus 13. So good vibes for Francesco here. And we'll see that later on in the Microsoft Excel portion. I did end up making the past performance spreadsheet with the number of events, missed cuts, and breaking out the strokes gained total by individual stat. So we'll look at that later on in the show. Let's see if there's anything else that we want to take a look at before we move on and dig into some specifics. I don't really think so. We did look at off the tee and approach as well as just overall ball striking, but I think before we start really digging in, let's take a look at the historic conditions, give ourselves a quick refresher. So again, we're going to have to focus on 2017 and 18 only, as those were the 2 years that the Quicken Loans was played at TPC Potomac. So scoring relative to par, 2018 average, 2017 very difficult. Always fast bent greens. The rough length has been average, and the course has always been short. So a quick review there. Here is the leaderboard from 2018. I mentioned Francesco Molinari just ran away with this tournament, shot minus 21. Let's see. Let's go ahead and get into some of the specifics here. So strokes gained. We noticed last night that strokes gained approach, just such a high importance factor here this week, as well as off the tee. You see, tee to green 17.3. Molinari putt well that week even. But even if he had been field average, it looked like he was going to, looked like he was going to run away from the field. So let's go ahead and start sorting some of these. Strokes gained approach, you see here just the high amount of correlation here. Your winner was the leader in strokes gained approach, top 5, top 10, runner up, 2 more top 20s and 2 more top 25s. You have to come all the way down to Rory Sabatini, and that's maybe 35 or so players before you have a guy that misses the cut in terms of positive strokes gained approach. Very, very important. Strokes gained off the tee, not necessarily as strong of a correlation, although pretty good. Top 30, top 5, middling from Kiradek. He didn't hit his irons well at all that week. Top 35, top 25, and then 10 winner, 20, 10, and another 20. So again, not as strong correlation with strokes gained approach, but certainly a decent amount. And we talked about the putting last night and how it appeared that it wasn't very important. And we got that from this chart here, strokes gained by shot type. So it was approach and then putting off the tee and around the green. But as you moved up the leaderboard, putting kind of lost its importance and off the tee gained, especially when you go to the winners. The winners, you can see, just putting didn't matter. It was all ball striking. That was part of the quick research that I put, or as much as I could fit in 140 characters on social media today, was around that and a couple other things around Kyle Stanley, your winner in 2017, and Molinari, winner in 2018. But we noticed how the putting wasn't really all that much of a factor. But looking at it from here, it is much more, at least in 2018, much more important than it was off the tee. So you have a top 15, a top 10, another top 15, a top 10, a clunker from Fathour, and then top 5, 2 25s, runner-up. Putting was somewhat important that year. And if we go to, let's cut this off at the top 22, just convenient for ties. You have 3 players that were negative and off the tee. You also have 3 players that were negative in strokes gained putting. A quick eyeball, looks like the numbers are roughly the same. So interspersed between the top 22. The clear thing is around the green was not a big factor in 2018 at all. You have 3, 4, 7 players that are below field average in strokes gained around the green. If we look at 2017, just very quickly, strokes gained, we have top 21 here. Off the tee, 3 that were negative and none more than 1 stroke in the negative. Putting, you had 5 players that were negative in strokes gained putting, and some of them quite a bit. I mean, your winner was negative in strokes gained putting. Ben Martin, 2.5 essentially. Jason Gore, 1.5. Bryson, almost 4. So putting was not a big factor in 2017 at all. Let's move on into fairways and greens. We saw in the course breakdown on Fantasy National that the distance was slightly longer here than the tour average, and fairways were a little bit less than the tour average. And you can kind of see that here in the leaderboard. You had quite a bit of positive in the distance department. Fairways were, some were very high. You had, Francesco, Ryan Armour at 6, but you had quite a few players that were negative in fairways gained. Instead, it looked like it was about greens, especially since these greens are very small, and scrambling percentage, or your successful scramble rate, is lower than the average tour event here. So perhaps a factor is hitting these small greens in regulation, but there is a little bit of distance. Let's see here. A little bit of correlation, but certainly nothing that jumps out. Tom Lovelady, big clunker of a made cut. Harkins, top 35. Varner was middling. Garrigus, top 30. Hostler, top 10. But you have miscuts, clunker to middling finishes. Not terribly important. Whereas if you sort on the greens, it's greens and regulation gained. Heavy correlation here. Your winner led in greens, top 35, top 20, top 10, top 5, 25, 10, 5, 20, runner up. Yeah, so greens and regulation were the big factor in 2018. Let's take a quick look at 2017 just to see if that's a continuing pattern. Again, fairways not necessarily all that important, but distance was also much less important that year. It was all about greens. So we at least have some consistency in the 2 years on this tab of what is important. A little bit too, the good drives gained, but greens and regulation, speaking to the ball striking, the iron play, that seems to be a heavy focus early on in this data dive show. Let's move back to 2018. Birdies and bogeys. This tournament in 2018 played average, and it looked like it was all about the bogey avoidance. You have to come down into tied for 23rd before you have a negative in bogeys avoided. You have a couple of negatives in the birdies gained. Curious to see 2017. If it's the same, then we might want to be bogeys avoided. Now, certainly the numbers or the level of negatives is less in the bogeys avoided. We have negative 0.3 to negative 0.9 in the birdies, but it looks like this is a little bit more even. The one thing that I'm very confident about, we're not going to look at eagles at all. There are just not a lot of eagle opportunities on this course. The par fives don't even yield eagles very much. The best eagle chance is on the drivable par 4. That's 2017. Let's go ahead and skip the 3s, 4s, and 5s for now. Let's go to proximity. And the majority of approach shots here at TPC Potomac came from 175 to 200. But you see a whole lot of high numbers in the total proximity. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out. So let's sort on the total procs here. And your winner was second, gaining almost 500 feet in proximity. You have Ryan Armour, 475. Couple of top 35s here, high middling or high finishes in the proximity leaderboard. So, all right, pretty strong there. If we sort on the specific 175 to 200, again, this is where my just being honest, being transparent, this is where my struggle is with proximities. You have such high finishes here. You got your winner and your top, a top 5 and a top 10, all in the top 5 of the proximity leaderboard from 175 to 200. But you also have 2 clunker of made cuts and then 2 missed cuts behind them, and then another run of, a couple of another high finishes. So nothing here from a data analyst says that this is an extremely important metric. You have a couple of, let's see, 4, 5. Yeah, so there's 8 players out of the top 22 that are negative in terms of negative in relation to the field from that approach length. So I wonder if 2017 will give any clarity. It doesn't look like it will. Again, some more negatives and a lot in relation to the field. Minus 52, minus 70, minus 54. Now, probably Kyle Stanley. Nope, I see Streelman. So let's sort on this. So you have a top 20, a middling, and a missed cut. And then Kyle Stanley was 4th in terms of strength in proximity, 175 to 200. Then your runner-up, middling, top 20, top 30, top 5. So again, I don't see a lot here that says proximity 175 to 200 is a major factor. Let's see. The total proximity, however, you have to come down to Leishman and Spencer Levine, and Levine is barely below field average in terms of total proximity. So really it's Mark Leishman, the only one of the top 12 with any sort of high negatives that week in proximity. And again, this proximity is pretty darn strong, at least in relation to other tournaments with proximity. Your best proximity finisher was Billy Hurley with a clunker of a made cut, and then middling finish from Stallings. Runner-up, middling, top 30, winner, top 20, top 5, top 5. Honestly, it looks like it's more total proximity than it is the specific 175 to 200. And the reason I was focusing on 175 to 200 is this approach shot distribution chart here. You see that the majority of approach shots come from the 175 to 200, 24% or almost 24%. But especially in terms of relative to the tour average, you have almost 7% more approach shots coming from 175 to 200 here than the average tour event. So that's why I wanted to see if this was a key factor this week, and it doesn't appear to be. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. Jump in chat or put it in the comments below. What do you think 175 to 200 is a major factor? If not, do you think there is an approach shot range that matters? Is it total proximity? Be curious to hear your take. So the more I look into it, the more it seems like total proximity is where I would want to focus if I focus on proximity. So before we go into the par 3s, 4s, and 5s, now that we have a bit of information that we can look at, let's move into these various tabs in Fantasy National. And I don't have any filters on here. Again, this is just back to January 1st. So we noticed that bogeys avoided was very important in 2018, but birdies and bogeys was about equal in 2017. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to look at opportunities gained. Definitely don't want to look at birdies or better. If I'm going to do that, I'm just going to do birdies because eagles is just not an important factor this week. So I'm going to cross off birdies or better and eagles gained. So if anything on this tab, I'm going to look at maybe opportunities gained and then obviously the birdies and the bogeys. Now whether they end up in the final mixed condition model, I'm leaning towards not, but at least we have an idea of who gives themselves the best opportunities in certain conditions. So since January 1st of 2022, your top opportunities gained players are Cameron Young, Russell Henley, Tony Finau, Keegan Bradley, Lonto Griffin, Rory, Luke List, Joseph Bramlett, Aaron Rai, and Callum Tarren. Now, the ones who are converting those opportunities the best, Cameron Young, first in opportunities, first in birdies. Russell Henley, second and second. Keegan, fourth and third. Lonto Griffin, 5th and 9th. So those are the 4 players who are top 10 in both opportunities and birdies. Conversely, there is only one player that is top 10 in opportunities and top 10 in avoiding bogeys, and that is Rory, 5th in opportunities, 8th in avoiding bogeys. I'll be curious to see. Let's go ahead and add the short course filter here, and let's see how that changes things. So again, I'm going to sort on opportunities gained. So since the beginning of the calendar year, your top opportunities gained players on short courses, they are Brandon Grace, Cameron Young, Russell Henley, Callum Tarren, Lonto Griffin, Corey Connors, Nick Taylor, Lee Hodges, Adam Svensson, and Josh Creel. I skipped Eric Van Rooyen because he has withdrawn. So there's your top 10 on opportunities on short courses. So we have some overlap here. Cameron Young, first in just total opportunities gained and tied for first in opportunities gained on short courses. Russell Henley was second overall. He's now tied with Cameron Young in terms of opportunities gained on short courses. Callum Tarren was up there. Lonto Griffin was up there. But you now have Corey Connors, Nick Taylor, Lee Hodges, Adam Svensson all jump in. And with the short course filter on, the players who are both top 10 in opportunities gained and birdies gained on short courses. You have Cameron Young, first in opportunities, 6th in birdies. So he has been top 10 in both. You have Lonto Griffin, 6th and 3rd. I believe he was top 10 in both. Adam Svensson is 10th in opportunities, 2nd in birdies on short courses. Now, the only player that is top 10 in opportunities and avoiding bogeys on short courses is Lee Hodges, 9th in opportunities, 4th at avoiding bogeys. but he does not get his birdie. So he is not converting those opportunities much at all. Let's see here. Brandon Grace, very surprising to see. He is first in opportunities, but 111th in birdies. So if the flat stick gets going, Brandon Grace might be somebody to look out for this week. Let's just take a quick look at Brandon Grace. Yeah, you can see here. I mean, look at these putting numbers. They are just woeful. Traditionally, has not been a terrible putter. He's not been good, but he's not been this bad traditionally. But I mean, holy smokes. -2, -3.5, -2.5, almost 2.5 there, 3. And that's led to his run of missed cuts. Now, at the RBC Heritage, he had a middling finish, but it was all predicated with the irons, which is fine. You can overcome a poor putting week if you have stellar iron play. Let's see, 2.5 here at the Phoenix, but his irons were atrocious. Man, Brandon Grace, it's hard to back Brandon Grace seeing these numbers. But if the putter does get hot and he puts everything together for one magical tournament, I mean, sure, but you can say that about a lot of guys. So interesting stuff there. Wanted to highlight that with the short course. Nothing to do with the Architect. Wind, I haven't really checked much. I do believe Friday the wind started to pick up and the weekend looked fairly windy, but I'm going to wait until Wednesday night, the DFS Tactics show, to really look at the wind. And if I see that it becomes more important, I'll make sure to post it on social media. But there is a look at this tab, the birdies and bogeys, here at Fantasy National. Let's move on to the fairways and greens. And we saw that it was a lot of greens in regulation. Distance was iffy in terms of importance. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just sort on greens in regulation. Let's go ahead and add the short course filter in case that filters out some people here. So your top greens in regulation players since the beginning of the calendar year on short courses. You got Russell Knox, Russell Henley, Adams Vincent, Joel Damon, Matthew Neesmith, Sepp Straka, Lucas Glover, C.T. Pan, Nick Taylor, and Matthias Schwab. So some of these players, probably no surprise. I mean, Russell Henley's just a great ball striker, great iron player. Russell Knox, great iron player. Adams Vincent was in there on the birdies and bogeys for short courses. Sepp Straka won at the Honda, a short course. Difficult, but short course. So yeah, let's see. Greens in regulation. Of those players that are top 10 in greens in regulation, really no one is high in distance. Sepp Straka's 20th. So Straka 20th in distance, 6th in greens. You've got Jared Wolf, 14th in distance, 10th in greens. Gary Woodland, 9th in distance, 13th in greens. So kind of a mutually exclusive thing here between the greens and the driving distance. What you do have is good drives gained. Be interesting to see if that becomes a big factor. I'm tending more towards the greens in regulation. We notice how fairways just weren't all that important at all. And then let's look at proximity really quickly before we focus on the specific par 3s, par 4s, and par 5s. Again, I just don't see a lot in the 175 to 200. So I'm going to sort on total proximity. And I am going to remove the short course filter here. I just want to see who generally gets the ball closest to the hole. So your top proximity players since the beginning of the calendar year. Those players are Tony Finau, Austin Smotherman, Cameron Young, Russell Knox, Corey Connors, Paul Casey, Gary Woodland, Keegan Bradley, Luke Donald, and Doug Gim. Again, skipping EVR because he is withdrawn. So Tony Finau, very, very, very good Mexico Open. Smotherman is somebody I've been high on. Cameron Young, a lot of high finishes. Paul Casey, I'm quite wary of Paul Casey. He has withdrawn in the past 2 tournaments that he has signed up for. Not sure how much I'm going to want to have exposure to Paul Casey. Gary Woodland, good month or so, really. Let's see. Mexico Open, a top 25. He did miss the cut of the Masters, but he had a very good run there from late February. 2 straight top 5s with the Honda and the API. Did miss the cut at the Players. Was in the bad part of the draw. That week is almost a throwaway. You had to be on the right side of the draw for the Players this year. Top 25 at the Valspar and a top 10 at the Valero. So Gary Woodland has been playing a lot better as of late. Look at these strokes gained approach numbers. You've got 6, 4.5, 3.5 off the tee. He has generally been very good. 4.5, 1.5 here. So Gary Woodland's game is starting to come back seemingly. Interesting. I just now noticed that they have added Paspalum in Fantasy National. That is awesome. I just realized that. That is sweet. Awesome. Let's see. Who else played last week? Doug Gim played. Look at that. Paspalum. Awesome. Sorry, nerding out a little bit. Anyway, coming back to the Wells Fargo. So there are your top proximity players. If, for whatever reason, 175 to 200 does matter a little bit, you have Austin Smotherman, who is 2nd in total proximity, 9th in 175 to 200. Also happens to be best at the 200 plus. And that's really it in terms of top 10 in total proximity and 175 to 200. You have some of these higher, I shouldn't say higher, you have some very close to the top 10. Was Russell Knox 15th, Luke Donald 15th, 19th, 20th, but Smotherman is the only one that is top 20, in top 10 in total proximity and 175 to 200. So I'm going to go ahead and set this at the par 3s. Let's go back to the leaderboards from 2018 and 2017, and we're going to be jumping from this to the course breakdown here at Fantasy National. So let's move to par 3s, and we saw last night that there is one of each length of par 3 here. So when we look at the scorecard, there's 225, so that is on the cusp, can go either way. You have a 201, again, right on the cusp, can go either way. You're short par 3 at 168, and then a 190. So really, it seems like the one that would have the most would be, would be the 200 to 225. But again, I don't know if that is enough to focus on. You have a 225. That's that one on the scorecard. You have a 201, which can easily come into this. And you have a 190, which can come into this. So I think it's just going to be strokes gained par 3s. But let's take a look. So in 2018, par 3s. You had a decent amount of correlation here. Pretty strong, to be fair. CT Pan, top 20. Winner, top 10, top 10, top 30. Top 5, top 5, top 10, top 20, top 30. Yeah, pretty strong. Pretty strong here in the par 3s. If there was a length, it seems to be the 200 to 225. Let's see. You have the highest consistent numbers. Now, the highest numbers total is the 175 to 200. You have a 3.8 here. Yep, that's the highest. You have a 1.5. A 1.4 didn't seem to be all that much of a factor. So looks like it's just strokes gained par 3. Maybe the 175 to 200. Not as confident in that. At least that was 2018. Let's take a look at 2017. Par 3s, seemingly less important. You do have a couple of negatives, and this is just off a straight eyeball test. You have Kevin Streelman down here with a 5, but the numbers were consistently much higher in 2018. Looking quickly, the top number here, 3.7, 2.3, 1.1. So again, if there is a length of par 3, it might be the 175 to 200s. I don't have a lot of confidence in that. There's not a lot of correlation here. I mean, top 5 and a top 20 is great, but then you go middling, top 30, top 35, clunker, and 2 missed cuts. So I'm starting to think it's just the par 3s if we're going to focus on that. So coming to the par 3s with no filters on. So your top performers on par 3s this calendar year. You have Sepp Straka, Brian Stewart, Luke Donald, Troy Merritt, Jared Wolfe, Max Homa, Grayson Sigg, Webb Simpson, Zach Johnson, and Denny McCarthy. So Sepp Straka has popped quite a bit. Troy Merritt has been up there quite a bit. This is the first time we're saying Max Homa, Webb Simpson, Zach Johnson. All right. And if the 175 to 200 is the biggest factor, you've got Sepp Straka here, first in par 3s total, first in 175 to 200. If Jared Wolfe, fifth in total, second in 175 to 200. Webb Simpson, seventh and fifth. I'll give an honorable mention here to Adam Svensson, 13th in total, fourth in 175 to 200. So there's a look at the par 3s. We'll move to the par 4s. Come to 2018 par 4 efficiency. You see here just the sheer amount of high number volume there is here. I mean, 12.1, your leader. I mean, look at this correlation here. I mean, first, runner-up, top 5, top 10, top 5, top 10, 3 top 15s, a top 20, 3 middling finishes, and then another long run of high leaderboard success to get to the first player that missed the cut that is positive in strokes gained par 4. I'm going to take a guess that that's about 45 players. Such an important factor. I truly believe it is one of the most important factors, along with strokes gained approach on the PGA Tour, just because there's a majority of strokes gained, or there's a majority of par 4s. It just makes sense. Let's see. If there is a length, look at this. Look at the par 4s, 450 to 500. 27th down here, still positive. So you have to come down to one player in the top 31 was negative in strokes gained par 4, 450 to 500. I mean, that is extremely high correlation here. And if we sort it, I mean, look at this. This is almost as strong as just the straight par 4s. Your winner was the best in this range of par 4s. Then you have a top 10, a top 30, 3 top 10s, a top 15, middling from Keradec, to be fair, runner-up, top 5, top 20s. Yeah, very, very, very strong here. The drivable, 4.2, not nothing, but don't think we want to put a whole lot of emphasis on just one hole. 350 to 400, again, just 4.2. 400 to 450, okay, fairly strong. 5.5 here from Ryan Armour and Tiger and Doc Redman. Decent amount of correlation here. We saw the 450 to 500. You have 8, 6, 5. So these players here, 3, 4, the top 8 in 450 to 500 have been more important than the top player in 400 to 450. That just speaks to the level of importance here. 500 plus, just 1.1. So if there's a length of par 4, it's 450 to 500. I feel like that's going to be a very important factor. At least it was in 2018. Let's check 2017 just to make sure. Par 4 efficiency. Again, look at the high volume of these numbers. 10, 11, 9, 11, 8s. So yeah. And again, 450 to 500s. Now you do have a few more negatives here than in 2018, but still the upper end of the par 4s, 450, 500 are there. Darnell, yo, how was your Mexico Open? Did you wager? Did you have any outright wagers? If you did have John Rahm, congratulations. You were willing to put some money on 3.5 to 1. I wasn't. Had a top 20 that cashed. How was your DFS? All that. And just generally, how you been? Don't remember seeing you online last week, so it's good for you to jump back and chat. Thanks for joining. So yeah, both years, 2017 and 2018, it was 450 to 500. That is the most important factor. So let's come back and we're going to look here. Since the beginning of the calendar year, your top strokes gained par 4 players: Cameron Young, Brian Harman, Corey Connors, Nate Lashley, Matt Fitzpatrick, Matt Kuchar, Ryan Armour, Gary Woodland, Rory, Jason Day, and Keegan Bradley. I skipped Mito. He has withdrawn. She played a little off the chalk, don't work. Joey, thanks for jumping in chat. How was your Mexico Open week and weekend? Darnell, yeah, I did not have a very successful DFS in the Mexico Open. I just didn't have the right players on the team, and I was wrong on a lot of stuff too. I was pretty high on Nick Taylor. He missed the cut. I was very high on Chris Kirk. He missed the cut. John Rahm was so damn chalky that, you kind of needed a very good 5 for 5. I was not high enough on Finau. It wasn't a very good week for me. The one thing I was very good or very proud of, I was very high on Brandon Wu. That was my top 20 cash. I really liked Brandon Wu last week. Runner up. Felt pretty good about that. Not too bad. Only lost a couple of bucks. Hey, anytime you can play some DFS and have some fun with it, only lose a little bit. Now we're here to win. So hopefully, you didn't take a whole lot of advice from me, but if you did, sorry. It was just not a good week for me, but hey, it happens. But coming back to the Wells Fargo, there's your top 10 performers in strokes gained par 4. To mirror that with 450 to 500, you have a lot of these players that are top 10 in both total and 450 to 500. Cameron Young, number 1 in total strokes gained par 4 and at the length 450 to 500. You have Corey Connors, 4th and 7th. You have Ryan Armour, 8th and 10th. Gary Woodland, 8th and 2nd. We'll give a couple of honorable mentions here. Nate Lashley, 5th and 11th. Rory, 10th and 11th. And Keegan, 11th and 13th. To be fair, Keith Mitchell, 14th and 9th. Seamus Power, 16th and 3rd. Riley and Lashley, my only good plays. Yeah, Davis Riley was I was not nearly high enough on Davis Riley. I had used him quite a bit early on in the year. Was burned, so I did not use Davis Riley at all last week. Nate Lashley, yeah, I had a little bit of Lashley, clearly not enough, but a couple of good calls there, Darnell. So there is a look at the par 4s here at the Wells Fargo. Moving right along, let's move to the par 5s. Sorry, jumping tabs here. Par 5 efficiencies. Let's look at these, and then we're going to move to Microsoft Excel real quickly. So par 5 efficiency doesn't look to be a whole lot of importance here. I mean, the highest number is 4.2. So par fives might be mitigated in importance. 550 to 600, 3.7, 2.5. So the reason why I think par fives might be mitigated, there's only two. Again, this is a par 70. One measures in the 550 to 600, one measures in 600 to 650. Just not sure how much par fives are going to matter. Now, when we looked at the course breakdown, the top 10s, par fives, the most important. Top 10s, the par fives were most important. But then, as you move to the top fives, they lost their importance in terms or in relation to the strokes gained par 4. The winners definitely took advantage of the par 5s, but that's such a narrow focus. I just don't know how much par 5s are going to be a standout metric this week. And it certainly doesn't look like it's either of the lengths, so just strokes gained par 5. If you sort that, it's decent from 2018. Your winner and a top 5 and a middling finish were the leaders in strokes gained par 5. Top 10, top 15, 20. So a decent amount of correlation there. 2017, we go to par 5s. Your highest is 4. And it's not strong correlation at all. If there was a length, it looks like it's the 550 to 600, but again, not very strong. So not sure how much focus is going to be on the par 5s. But I'll take a look at strokes gained par 5 here very quickly. So your top performers on par 5s since the beginning of the calendar year: Matt Fitzpatrick, Russell Henley, Cameron Percy, Matthias Schwab, Johnny Vegas, Keith Mitchell, Sam Ryder, Rory, Siwoo Kim, and Seamus Power. All right. So hopefully that gives you all a decent idea on some of the metrics that we scrutinized and what you think. And if you aren't able to catch it live, put it in the comments. I want to hear from you all. Do you think the 175 to 200 is going to be a big factor because of this chart here? Or are you going to go with the numbers and say it's total proximity considering the high volume of those numbers? So that's going to do it for the Fantasy National portion. Let me switch over to Microsoft Excel real quick. View is going to be skewed here for a second. Let's go to Microsoft Excel. All right. So bring back chat. This is the past performance chart that I usually make for each tournament. And again, this is only at TPC Potomac, so there's only 2 years of data to gather. That's why you'll only see 1 or 2 here. And of course, the usual stuff here: miscut, finish, and then the numbers broken out. So I'm going to go ahead and filter this for the players who have played both times and see what we have here. So not a lot of players played both 2017 and 2018. It looks like it was, I'll move my drink here. So you had 23 players that played it both 2018 and 2017. Your top average finish there was Sung Kang. Look at all those strokes gained approach, makes a whole lot of sense. You got Ricky, but then again, this is Ricky, more prime Ricky than where he is now. Approach and putting. Leishman, top 10 average. Johnson Wagner, Kevin Streelman, Nick Watney. Look at all these numbers in the strokes gained approach. Makes a whole lot of sense. Surprisingly, putting. Some of these guys are pretty high in the putting department. Distance, not really all important for these guys that are hovering at the top of these. Greens looks to be the bigger factor. Let's take a look at the specific par 3s, par 4s, and par 5s. Actually, I just noticed, bogeys. A lot of high or at least positive numbers in the bogeys for these players, whereas birdies, not necessarily the strongest. So, okay. Par threes. 150 to 175 looked to be positive, but not a whole lot of importance here. I mean, you have a couple of guys with 3 in total, but they've missed the cut once with poor finishes, or poor average finishes. Nothing stands out in terms of the length. I would say the 150 to 175 is more than the 175 to 200, just because of the amount of positive players. So, interesting there. Par 4s, yeah. If you're struggling at the par 4s, you're struggling. If you're good at the par 4s, you're generally rising on these leaderboards. Sun Kang, a lot of strokes gained par 4 total. Yeah, look at this here too. 450 to 500. That's a typo by me. 450 to 500. A lot here. A lot. So I feel even more confident that the 450 to 500 is going to be a factor this week. We'll move to the par 5s. Again, it just doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of importance here. I mean, 2.1 is the highest of these players that have played it twice, and certainly not in the individual lengths at all. So here's the proximity total column. Pretty high proximity totals here. 175 to 200. Okay, there's a few higher numbers here. But again, proximity total. So that's the players that have played it twice. I'm actually going to incorporate everybody here and remove the filter. So aforementioned Francesco Molinari just ran away from the field. His lone time in 2018 gained 10 strokes on approach. Let's see, Ryan Armour, who finished second. Abraham Ancer, surprisingly, finished fourth. All of his predicated on off the tee. So clearly a couple of different ways to get around this, but it's a ball striker's course. So a lot more emphasis on these two stats as opposed to these two. Let's see here. Stuart Sink. Let's see. All right. Interesting stuff there. Greens. Yeah, okay. Decent amount here. Surprising to see Lahiri. So terrible at the greens his 1 year here, but he still finished tied for 13th. Bogeys, birdies, roughly the same. We saw that from 2017. 2018, it was the bogeys that were more important, or bogeys avoided, but not terribly confident to say one is more important than the other. Par 3s, I'm more so looking for the par 4s. I mean, look at these asinine levels of numbers. You got 12, 11, 8, 7, and then the 450 to 500 again. Sorry, this is a typo. I'll actually correct it for you all right here. That's 450 to 500. Yeah, just, I mean, a whole lot of positive. I mean, you got to come down here to Doc Redman before you even get a negative. What did I just do? Doc Redman. So that seems very important there. Par 5s, again, don't see a lot here, especially since the top number is 4.2 as opposed to the par 4s, which was 12. So almost triple the importance. And then finally, proximity. Interesting stuff here. You do have a couple of players that have played it very well that are poor in the total proximity, like Mark Leishman. Poor in the total proximity. I imagine he's probably been pretty good at par 4s or approach. Let's see. Middling from Wagner. Streelman's been good. Watney's been good. Percy's been good. So it looks like more proximity total than 175 to 200. So that is a quick look at the past performance here at TPC Potomac. If you didn't catch At the beginning, there's been a few field changes. The bigger names have been Eric Van Rooyen and Mito Pereira are the ones that have withdrawn. I know there's a couple others. The names are escaping me. But those are the two bigger players. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the support. Joey, Darnell, as always, jumping in chat. Put in the comments, do you think the proximity total is going to matter? Do you agree that the par 4, 450 to 500 is the most important individual length of hole here? Do I need to put some around the green metrics in? Do you think I'm overlooking that at all? Would be curious to hear your all's takes. So for any of the wagers that you have submitted so far for the Wells Fargo, for any of the wagers you're thinking about making at the Wells Fargo this week, and until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.